Voy a presentar al próximo ponente, nuestro primer ponente, en inglés, para que él entienda lo que estamos diciendo. Just for you, David. Our first speaker today is David Cannon, a South African living in Texas. A strange combination there. He is Director of Service Management for Hewlett-Packard globally, and he's also President of itSMF International, so we're very pleased to have him with us today. Thank you for coming. He's author of the Service Operations book for ITIL version 3 in 2007, and of the new ITIL 2011 Service Strategy book, which he's going to talk to us about today. And he's going to talk to us today about the new focus of Service Strategy in ITIL version 3. Would you please welcome David Cannon.
Buenos días. I need to finish rather quickly because I have an appointment at the spa with Fabiola. It's very good to be here again. I was in Madrid a few years back with this conference, and there were a lot fewer people. So I think that you should be very proud of the number of people that you have here, and also I think of looking out the clear quality of people that we have here today. So well done. Fuerte. I'm going to talk about the new Service Strategy book. This was released just a couple of months ago, and it was an update to the IT infrastructure library. But I'd like to talk a little bit about why IT is managed as a service. I think that in the last few years, the whole idea of service management has become separated from where it began, in the data center and with IT management. And it has become sort of a specialized area on its own. And I think we need to talk about where this came from and why we talk about IT service management. I'd also like to talk about the credibility problem that we have in IT and what we need to do to overcome this problem. One of the major areas in service strategy from the 2007 edition was the whole idea of value. In fact, one of the authors of that book, Majid Iqbal, talked a lot about value as being the central component of service strategy. And it was certainly in service strategy, but it didn't come across as being the central component. So I'd like to talk about what we've done to talk about or to express the fact that value is central to how IT is managed. And then I'm going to talk about the actual book and some of the changes we made to the book to express that. Now, first of all, why is IT managed as a service, and why do we call it IT service management? Well, today what we see is that most people, when they talk about IT service management, they're talking about a small group of people within the organization that focus on implementing processes. And in many organizations, the word service management may as well just be process management. But in fact, that is not what service management was meant to be, and it really isn't what service management started out as. And so I'd like to talk about this idea of service management, what it is. In fact, service management is management of IT. It is not just the job of a group of process people, it is the job of every IT manager right through to the CIO. And it started that way because when the first version of ITIL was written, there were a number of choices as to the kind of model we could use in expressing how IT should be managed. In the 80s and 70s and 80s, one of the most common ways of talking about how IT should be managed was using the example of a factory. Even today, when we talk about operations, we often use the word production. And that comes out of this theory that we can manage IT as if it were a type of assembly line or a kind of factory. And in fact, if we're talking about a factory or a production environment, what we're really talking about are products. And you can see here the kind of things that you do with products is you have fixed output. In a factory, every product has to look exactly the same. Quality control measures products to make sure that they are within specification. Any product that is not in the exact specification will be rejected. Now, in IT, there is nothing fixed about the output we deliver. Just think of a typical email that you receive every day. There's no such thing as a standard email. The size is different, the purpose of the email is different, the contents of the email are different, the sender, the receivers, every single email is unique. Just think of every transaction you do in IT. It is not a single fixed output. It is different depending on who's using it. In a production environment, the product will follow exactly the same route through the factory every single time. Goes through exactly the same machines, and every machine will do exactly the same thing to every product. Very predictable. Now, in IT, that is certainly not the case. Exactly the same transaction may follow different routes through IT, different network segments, different machines, and especially if you virtualized your environment, sometimes you don't even know which machine is busy processing the transaction. In a production environment, raw materials are taken on the one end and they're converted into a product on the other end. Now, you may have seen some white papers or some discussion talking about the fact that in IT, data is the raw material and the output of that material, for example, a report or something on the screen, would be the product. Now, there may be some truth to that example, but in fact there's a lot more to it than that. Data is not exactly a raw material. Data in itself is a product. Data is created by the users of our systems, and it is put into those systems as a result of using those systems. It is not just raw material. So in fact, in IT, what we have is a repetitive cycle of use of data, information, knowledge, etc. Very different to what you see in a factory. But here's the main reason why there is a difference between services and a factory environment, and that is that how value is created. So in a production or factory environment, value is created and value is realized. In other words, we achieve the value whenever the product changes hands. So there is no value until the product is sold. And when the product is sold, the interesting thing is that the value of that product continues to stay with the product. For example, you can buy a product, a tennis racket, for example. When that tennis racket has been used, then if you don't want it anymore, you can get onto eBay or something like that and you can sell it. So for example, Rafa Nadal, who you might know, may only use a racket for 1 or 2 games. But if he sells it, it's probably worth a lot more than what he paid for it. So the value is carried in the product. So you can sell and resell that product. It becomes something that maintains its value over time and may even increase its value over time. You can store it in a warehouse and it will still have value. Now, when we talk about services, we're talking about something very different. In a service, there is a dynamic, real-time demand. The service that is delivered depends 100% on who is actually standing in front or sitting in front of the computer at any given time. If a person is not sitting in front of a computer, there is no service being delivered. There is no service. So the demand is real-time, it's dynamic. You don't have that in a factory. You don't have customers lining up outside the door and pressing a button. Yes, I would like a computer. No, I would like a car. I would like a lounge suite. You don't have that. Right? But in IT, you do. People stand in front of the actual service portal and they press a button and they want one of maybe 1,000 different services to come out of that screen to them. Which one do they want? Well, it depends what they're doing, and it depends what kind of mood they're in, and it depends what they want to achieve. So it's different every single time. The output is always variable, changeable routing, dynamic components. But here's something that is really important, and that is how value is created and realized, and it's different than a factory environment. For the first thing, in a service, the output is not as important as the outcome. Now, this is one of the key themes that you'll see in the service strategy book. Service outcome is what we need to focus on rather than the output. Now, what does that actually mean? Let's talk about my stay in the hotel last night. Let me give you an example. When I got to the hotel, I checked in, and the room was available, 100% available. Not even 99.9. It was 100% available. I went into the room. Now, if you were to check into this hotel room, what would you expect to achieve as a customer of this hotel? Would you expect to achieve a good night's sleep? Would you want to be rested when you woke up this morning? Would you maybe want to be able to have some food so that you felt good about coming to this conference? I think those are very important for me. Now, a good night's sleep. How do you measure a good night's sleep? Well, the room was 100% available. Does that mean I had a good night's sleep? Well, I don't know, because it depends on how comfortable the bed was. It depends on whether there was any noise from itSMF Congress delegates arriving and partying all night. There's a lot of things which can determine whether I have a good night's sleep. Now, let's see, do you agree with me? If I do not have a good night's sleep at the hotel, have I achieved my goals in booking the hotel room? No. So that is the outcome that I was trying to achieve. Do you think the hotel will be happy if I go to the hotel and say, I did not achieve a good night's sleep because the hotel was too noisy? No, they would not be happy. Why? Because I'm going to go on TripAdvisor and I'm going to put a report in there about the fact that I could not sleep well in the hotel. Now, if this was IT, do you know what the hotel would say to me? But your room was available. Didn't you have water in your room? Yes. There was a bed? Yes. Okay, well, we did our job. Right? That's how our service level agreements are written. Your service was available for 97.8% of the time. You should be happy. But didn't we achieve the outcomes? Well, we don't care about outcomes. That's your job. We've just got to provide the service. That's the old style of IT, and it doesn't work anymore. For example, here's another example of an outcome-based measurement. When I got onto the plane, I flew out of Dallas, and when I got on the plane, I was going to fly another airline. I got on the plane, and the pilot came on, and he said, welcome on board, ladies and gentlemen. We're very proud of our safety record. For example, this plane itself has a 99.9% availability rate. I got off that plane immediately. Right? That's the difference between an output-based service and an outcome-based service. The outcome-based service guarantees that you're pretty much going to get to your destination safely. Safely. So I'm worried about the outcome, not the output. And this is where we need to focus on delivering IT services. It's focusing on the outcome. What does the server, what does the user, the customer need to achieve when the service is available? So the outcome, more important than the output. Why is that? Well, it's because the value is only generated when the customer is physically using the service. See, where a product, you can take the product and you can store it and it maintains its value. And then you can sell it after some time. But you can't do that with a service. You cannot take a hotel room or a hotel stay and store it in a warehouse and resell it to somebody else. You can't do that. Because even if you resell, let's say I buy on eBay or Groupon, I buy a night stay at a hotel and I sell it to somebody else. I'm not actually selling that service. The service only occurs when that person actually comes and stays at the hotel. So you may find that I sell the hotel night to somebody else on eBay, they buy it, but they don't go to the hotel. There's no value in that, none at all. So the value only exists when it's used by the customer. For a service to be delivered, for value to be created, three things need to be in the same place at the same time: the supplier, the customer, and the interaction between the two, the service. Take one of those out of the room, and there is no service. So for value to be created in service management, those three things have to be present. And therefore, the real value of a service is not carried in the service. It's carried in the relationship between the customer and the supplier and the transaction between them. That's where the value is. And the value only happens when those three things are together at the same time. That is why we call it service management. Service management is making sure that customers are achieving their outcomes by having the supplier and the customer where they need to be at the time they need to be there so that that transaction can take place. Do you think that a group of process people sitting just outside the data center door can achieve that on their own? No way. There's only one person that can make sure that that is achieved, and that is the CIO of the organization. Job of service management is the job of management of the organization. It is not just a group off on the side. So when we talk about service management, we are in fact talking about IT management as a whole. And that is the job of the service strategy book, is to explain how to set up those relationships, those services, and make sure that we're actually delivering value to our customers. Now, some basic principles about this. These are things that were in the service strategy book, but may not have been clear. And let me explain just something about the scope of the project that we were on. This was an update project. It was not a new version of ITIL. So we were given very clear instructions. We were not allowed to remove any key concept from the books. If it was in the books, it had to stay in the books. We were also not allowed to add in any new concepts. So all we were allowed to do was to fix some of the inconsistencies between the books, as well as fix some of the things that were not clear. Now, why were there inconsistencies in the books in the first place? Well, the reason was because in version 3, the 2007 edition, all of the authors wrote the books at exactly the same time. Now, the books of service design, service transition, and service operation contained mostly information that had already been in the previous version of the books. But the service strategy book and the continual service improvement book were new. The material that was being discussed in service strategy was fundamentally new. I must be honest, looking at that book, sometimes it was very confusing to read. A lot of people didn't understand that book. But the one really good thing about the service strategy book is that somebody actually wrote it. Because before then, we didn't have a definition of what service strategy was and what should be in there and how those pieces should relate to each other. But those two authors, Majid Iqbal and Michael Nevis, actually got out, did some research, and created a body of knowledge that we could start with. It may not have been perfect, but at least it was a good start. And that was a very good thing. But it also resulted in the fact that the authors of the other books were trying to read and understand that material real time as they were writing their own books. And that meant that there was sometimes some inconsistencies between the books which didn't get picked up quickly enough and corrected. And so, for example, you'll see that there are terms in the service strategy book that may have been used slightly differently in the other books. So we had to fix that kind of thing. In addition, a lot of the concepts in the service strategy book were a little bit, let's say, difficult to read. Number one, the language that was used was, in some cases, a little bit academic. And in another case, a lot of the concepts had been spread through different parts of the book. For example, if you talk about a service portfolio, you had to look in 3 or 4 different places to try and figure out what a service portfolio was and how it worked. So we had to defragment the books. And fortunately, we have a utility for that, and that was me. So here are some of the differences between the old book and the new book. So for example, when we talk about strategy, in the older book, the 2007 edition, there were some definitions of strategy, but again, they were spread through the book. What I had to do was find them and pull them all into one place and give some clear definition of strategy. One of the things that was used in the book was something called the 4 Ps. I have no idea whether the 4 Ps in English are also 4 Ps in Spanish. They are? Good. In that case, you'll recognize them. So the first P is perspective, which says, what do we want to do? Where do we want to go? It's the vision that we have, maybe a mission that we've set for ourselves. This is what we as an organization want to achieve. This is where we want to be in 5 years' time or at the end of this year. The position, which says, why do customers want to buy or invest in services from me? Why wouldn't they go to an outsourcing company, the cloud, or maybe some other, maybe do it themselves? Why are we so good at providing services? What makes us unique in the marketplace? When I've understood those 2 Ps, then I put in place the 3rd P, which is the plan. How do I achieve those? How do I leverage my strengths to be able to achieve the perspective that I set for myself? And then it appeared in the book that once we have the plan, all you have to do is execute it 100%, and you then have these wonderful patterns. Patterns which are basically a formula for how the organization works once the strategy has been executed. Isn't that perfect? So that's the 5th P, perfect. No, in fact, that is not what the author of the 4 Ps actually wrote. And we had to do a little bit more research into this, and I believe that was Mintzberg. Maybe my fellow authors can, oh, there you go. So Mintzberg, I actually went and read that, and what Mintzberg was actually saying is this doesn't work. This just doesn't happen in real life. Here's an example. You may set yourself a strategy, and you may be 6 months through the year, and suddenly you get a new CEO. And then suddenly, you're not selling touchpads anymore. And suddenly, you're not selling PCs anymore. Where did that come from? Now, of course, that actually happened. But it often happens on a very lower level. It happens in every project. You set your project plan up. You know exactly what the project is going to achieve. You know exactly where your strategy is going. And then things start changing. As you start rolling it out, some of the users don't like it. They would like something changed. Some other users say this is never going to work for them. Maybe the legislation changes, and you have to make some changes to the confidentiality of the data. And so I've never been involved in a single strategy or a single project where the eventual product that comes out is the same as what we planned for in the beginning. Never. And Mintzberg recognized this fact, and he said, you know, this is reality in life. You're living in a dynamic environment that changes all the time. If you want to focus on implementing strategy, what you have to do is by all means, you have to have the perspective and the position. But when it comes to putting plans in place, you have to be continuously monitoring the environment around you. And some of the changes in the environment will make sure that plans are not going to be implemented. There are some plans that you have to put to the side, maybe even cancel altogether. Now, in the past, what's happened is we look at the strategy and we think, oh, the strategy is the absolute authority. We have to stick to the letter of the strategy. And so what we do is we kind of ignore the fact that some of these plans aren't going to work, and we either implement them anyway and they fail, or else we kind of ignore the fact that they were there and we come up with some explanation after the project has been implemented as to why they didn't work. Well, what Mintzberg is saying is don't do that. Recognize that your plans are going to change and have a formal procedure for acknowledging that and deciding exactly how they're going to change, and then adjust your project, adjust your strategy as the plan changes. Now, of course, for every deferred plan, there is going to be a new plan. Okay, so we're not going to sell touchpads anymore. What are we going to do? How are we going to market that? What is the company going to do instead of selling touchpads? And those are called emergent plans. Now again, these are not just things that we react to. These are things which we formally sit down and evaluate. What is the new plan going to be? How are we going to implement it? How is it going to affect the overall strategy? Now, when you take the emergent plan, you add it to your plans that you eventually do execute, take away the deferred plans, what you end up with are the patterns. Now, here's the really good thing about patterns. Patterns are the de facto strategy of the organization. They are the actual strategy that you ended up with after you implemented the strategy minus the deferred plans plus the emergent plans. So the patterns in the organization become the baseline for your next strategic planning round. And that was the real value of what Mintzberg was defining. So we updated that and made sure that that was a little bit clearer. One of the other things, and here I have to admit that I wouldn't say we added something fundamentally new to the book, but we did have to clarify this. And that was the whole definition of what were called business services and IT services. I have not yet seen an organization where business services and IT services were defined successfully. So what is a business service? Well, in some organizations, it's the service that IT provides to the business. In other organizations, it's the service that the business provides to its external customers. What's an IT service? Well, an IT service is a technical service that's delivered to the business. Yeah, but don't we sometimes in IT deliver technical services to external customers? So is that an IT service or is that a business service? It's a nightmare. So we had to clarify this. So the first thing that we did is we clarified the fact, and by the way, this was in ITIL, it just was never really clearly stated. There is a difference between internal and external customers. Now I want to be very careful here and say that they are customers. Some people have used this as an excuse to treat internal customers badly. Okay? That is not what we're saying. What we're saying is there is a difference in how you interact with internal customers versus external customers. So, for example, in internal customers, we are involved in, is that 15? Thank you very much. I'll be speaking quicker. The translator will be very happy to know. In an internal business, customer, you are actually part of the decision-making process. You actually get to make the decisions with the business. Now, in an external customer, you don't. External customer, they just tell you what they need and you deliver it, and they pay you, hopefully. It's very different. Now, here's another thing. Internal customers, we sometimes refer to as the business. But in fact, 5 minutes. Oh, I see, that's a little exclamation mark, not a 1. Right, thank you. 5 minutes. So, here's the thing with internal versus external. Let me give you an example. Traditionally in IT, when the business tells us to do something, we have no option but to do it, correct? That is absolutely the wrong way of handling things. Does the business unit have the option of going forward with the service or saying, we're not going to do that service? Do they? Yes, they do. Why? Because they have certain objectives to meet. We have the same objectives. Let me give you an example of how an internal customer is different from an external customer. For example, we work in, let's say, a very important healthcare and insurance company, health insurance company. The privacy of data is exceptionally important. So we want to make sure that it is absolutely secure. The CFO and the CEO come to me, I'm the CIO, and they say to me, we want you to build an absolutely secure data center, and the only place we can think of to do it is on the moon. What am I going to say as the CIO? The traditional model says, yes, of course, whatever you want, I'll do it, right? If you did that, you would bankrupt your company. And it would be your fault. Not theirs, your fault. You see, the thing is that you are as responsible for the success of the business as they are. You are a business unit, just as they are. Do you think of finance as a business unit? Yes? HR, do you think of them as a business unit? Do you know what? Not one of those two organizations actually deliver a valuable service outside of the organization. They are purely internal service providing organizations, just like us. So if they're business units, we're business units. Why? Because we get to make decisions about how the company can be successful. And in this case, if I agreed to build a data center on the moon, we would not be successful, so I am not going to do it. Now, let me give you an example of external customer. As you heard, I work for HP. Let's say you came to me and said, hey, we want to build a data center on the moon. What would I say? Yes! We can retire after this one. There's only two questions I'm going to ask you. One, do you have the money? Two, is it legal? Now that's HP. You know, other companies might say, we might not ask that second question, I don't know. But that's it. I don't care, you know, whether you're meeting your business objectives or not. All I care about is, am I meeting my business objectives? Now, I am concerned about the outcomes. I do want to make sure that you achieve your outcomes. Why? Because if you achieve your outcomes, you'll be satisfied and you'll do business with me again. I'm still only thinking about my business objectives. That's the difference between external and internal customers. We kept the same definition of a service, so I left that there. But I did note that in terms of adding value, IT traditionally has added only two types of value. And that is this. Application development rolls out a new service. It's going to save the business at least 15% in cost. It's going to increase sales by 20%, and it's going to make our sales transactions 5% quicker. Ah, that's fantastic. They roll it out, and suddenly we walk in operations and, what's this? Who ordered that new machine? I've never heard of that operating system before. Database? Whoa, what's that? Well, we have to support it, I guess. So let's go and get trained, and we'll get some new management tools. It's going to cost $250,000, but that's okay, we can do it. The whole project, by the way, costs $20 million. We in operations need $250,000 to be able to manage it. So we go to the business, we say, we need $250,000. The business says, what? $250,000? Oh, where are we going to come up with that kind of money? But you spent $20 million. Yeah, you're right, we spent $20 million, and we've got nothing for it. Yeah, but we just need $250,000. What for? So we can manage it. But that's your job. Oh. Eventually, we get to the point where we have to say, well, you know, we just have to have the money. And they say, well, okay, well, what if we don't give you the money? And here comes the value proposition of IT. Well, you don't have to pay us the $250,000. But of course, you know, we can't guarantee that the system will always be available. You know, accidents happen. The network may go down. The server may fail. The shift might not turn up for work. So I'm going to make you an offer. So now that is the value proposition traditionally that IT has offered the business. If you don't pay us, your systems are going to go down. It's the most terrible value proposition you can offer. No wonder they hate us. I will just rush through these slides. Oh, 2, thank you. Or 12. When you deliver value, you spend money. You have to spend money to be able to deliver the value. But when you join those items that you spent money on together, that's when you start creating the value. Now, from this chart, you can see that we've spent a lot of money, but we've also created a lot of value, because when you take a database, you join it together with an application, you host it, and you put communications on it, and you make it available to a customer, it's very valuable. So this whole thing may cost you, I don't know, 1,000 euros, but you can sell it for maybe 5,000, 10,000. So you've added value. Now, from this chart, the only thing you can see is that money has been spent and value has been added. I said, if you can sell it for 10,000. That's not on this chart. You have to be able to put the value realized. Now, the rules are, if value is not realized, value added and money spent is the same thing. In other words, you didn't add value, you just spent money. It has to be greater than money spent, and you cannot add value internally until the value is realized. By the way, there have been companies that tried to add value. In other words, they sold services from one business unit to another. Many of those individuals today are sitting in jail. It is, in fact, illegal to do that, by the way. You cannot sell and report as revenue monies that are transferred inside the organization, right? So the rule is this. If you in IT want to demonstrate value, you have to link your service to where the value is realized, not to where you think the value is being added. Right? You have to go to where the actual revenue happened. You have to link your service to that. If you cannot do it, you will always be a money spend organization. Nobody will ever see you as adding value. And here's the second value that we in IT add. That is, when you are perceived by the business as spending money, and that's all you do, what is the only value that you as an IT department can demonstrate? Yeah, spend less money, cut costs. How many of you have had to cut your budgets dramatically over the last 5 years? You know, and I know, that when you cut those budgets, you cut valuable resources that have impacted your business. But you can't prove it, right? The only thing that happens is the business, they don't see cost cutting equals bad service. They see bad service, money spent. They're still spending too much money, let's cut even more, right? And that's the problem with value. So basically, you have a number of services in here. We're delivering services to the business. That's what we call them. It's almost like they're some sort of holy religious group. The business. No, the business is another business unit like us, right? We're delivering services to them, and then they take those, deliver them to the customer. If you want to demonstrate the value of what happens inside this box, you have to be able to show where the value is realized. That's the red line. Can you add value? The blue line. You can only demonstrate value add if, and only if, you link the blue lines to the red lines. If you do not link that blue line to a red line, it is just money spent. So, measuring return on investment as a result of this misunderstanding in the past, measuring ROI has been done by the IT manager. That was a very long 1 minute. We tend to manage ROI as if we're an external service provider. So basically you say, okay, here's what the service cost. We're going to sell it to you. You give us revenue, and as long as the revenue is greater than what we spent, there's return on investment. But actually, so you can measure return on investment in the IT department, right? Wrong. You cannot measure return on investment in an internal IT department. What you can measure is cost saving. Right, here's an internal service provider. We provide a service at a cost, and we get funding. We do not get revenue, we get funding. And funding covers the cost. Where is the return on investment measured? It's measured by the business unit that uses that service. Now, I was told by David Wielden that I was being very unfair. What if an IT manager saves €1 million by changing a technology? And it's cheaper, for example, by changing technology, the maintenance is cheaper, the licensing is cheaper, the hardware is cheaper, so we save money. Isn't that a return on investment? It may be, I don't know. But can you tell me with 100% certainty that when you cut that $1 million out of your IT budget, you did not impact the business in any way? If you can tell me that you saved $1 million and the business didn't even notice, then you've had a return on investment. But I can guarantee you that most IT managers who save $1 million out of their budget don't even know how they impacted the business. So it's very important to measure return on investment there. Now I'm going to end here. I'm just going to say that there are 5 different processes in the service strategy book. You will be able to read these slides, and even better, you can read the book, which I did bring. It's really a great bag here. I disagree with Fabiola. I think this is just fuerte. Here is the new strategy book. Gartner has done extensive research on this, and their major finding on this book is that it is 40% thicker. There are now, in this book, 5 clear processes. They're in a separate chapter called Processes. The processes in this book all have a flow chart, and they are designed and structured exactly the same as every other book. So you can see them. Strategy management, service portfolio management, which in my opinion is going to be the most important and significant process to come out of this, because this is where IT and the business agree which services they will deliver, which services they will not deliver, and how much money will be invested in those services, and what the return on investment will be. Third one is financial management, of course, because you can't measure investment. And by the way, to do this, you have to be able to explain to the customer what the actual cost of a service is, not how much you're going to allocate back to them at the end of the year. Right? You can do that, but you have to tell them how much the service costs. The fourth process is demand management, because you need to know what the business is going to do with that service and how it's going to use it. And the fifth one is business relationship management. I would like to point out that there is a lot of value in this book, not just the content, which is very important, but because it's 40% thicker, we now have 2 very important uses for the book. One, if somebody does not want to follow your strategy, this book can really hurt them. And secondly, now you have, you can actually convince your CEO and CIO why they need to do strategy. You don't actually have to let them read this book. That's not important. But listen to this. That's impressive. So I would encourage you to do this. Now, we've run out of time, but there is something very important that I need to show you. It is a new process that I've created. And it is very important. You can see there's a lot of stuff in this book. And this presentation is 40% longer than it should have been. So, I do have a process for questions and answers. So, yeah, it's very important. Are there any questions? Okay. So if there were, I'll walk it through quickly because it is very important that we follow this process, as you know. So if there are no questions, then I would thank you. I am available after the session. I'll be out front there, and then we leave. Now, but then they said, well, what if you don't know the answer to the question? Of course, that would never happen. But if it does happen, this is what you do. Now, this is, for any of you who are going to be presenting later in the session, I would like to educate you about this process. It is the formal itSMF process for answering questions. If I don't know the answer, what I need to say is this. Oh, that was a great question. You know, I have presented this all over the world. No other group has actually had the intelligence to come up with a question like that. I am amazed. But unfortunately, we've run out of time. And I'd like to thank you very much for your time. It was wonderful being with you. I will be available after the session. Okay, thank you.